What we actually did was we were asked to start a pregnancy center inside the Dallas Dream Center, but that was going to take about 2 years of restoration of this historic building. And we were actually on top of the building in downtown Dallas, and they were serving out the parking lot currently. And I felt like the Holy Spirit just said, if you had a mobile unit, you could serve now.
Welcome to Lifeline for Leaders, a podcast created to strengthen and connect those serving in pregnancy care clinics and pro-life ministries. I'm Linda Thomas.
And I'm Kirk Thomas. Each week we sit down with leaders, ministry partners, authors, and experts who shape the pro-life landscape, sharing practical insights you can use right away and inspiring stories that remind you you're not walking this journey alone.
Our mission is to help you serve with confidence and resilience. This is your community, your support, your lifeline. This episode's lifeline is clarity and conviction in a complex culture. We are so glad you're here today because we have an incredible guest, Jennifer Shelton, CEO of RealOptions in North Texas. Jennifer has spent 22 years on the front lines of the pro-life movement, going from a fresh college grad teaching abstinence in schools to leading a multi-location ministry that's changing lives every single day. Not only is she a mother and wife, she's an author, a legislative advocate, a national speaker, and if you went by her accomplishments alone, you'd have to agree that everything truly is bigger in Texas. Jennifer, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, thanks for having me. I don't know if all that's true, though. So,
well, we start each episode with a prayer before we get into the conversation. So, Kirk, if you would take care of that for us.
Well,
please.
I would love to, Linda. Thank you. Father, we invite your presence into this conversation. We let every word encourage, equip, and inspire the leaders listening today. Thank you for raising up voices like Jennifer's who fight for the vulnerable, speak truth with compassion, and remind us that one calling, fully surrendered, can change thousands of lives. In your name, Jesus, amen.
Amen.
All right. Well, nice to talk to you, Jennifer. I know, were you at Heartbeat Conference?
yes, I just briefly saw you. I saw you on stage. Congratulations on
Thank
that,
you.
by the
Thank
way.
you. I appreciate that.
So, yeah, but just briefly, I didn't get to actually visit much with you.
Yeah, I knew you were busy, and I know how busy you are I just kind of follow you on LinkedIn, and I mean, it just seems like you've been all over the country in the last 12 months, so very busy and in doing what you do at the center, and then also all the other things that you do in the pro-life movement. So we thank you for that, and we thank you for being on the podcast. So just first question, Jennifer, when you walked into RealOptions 22 years ago, right out of college, what did you expect when you walked into the center, and did it turn out to be what you expected?
I don't even know if I would have identified myself as pro-life. I mean, it was one of those things where I was exiting Bible college. I wanted to help women. I thought women's ministry was kind of my direction. And I mean, I valued life, but I had never really considered myself or labeled myself. And someone just said, hey, there's got to be women at a pregnancy center, so why don't you apply there? And so, I'm old school. So way back then, I opened up the yellow pages and called the first pregnancy center that I found. And it happened to be RealOptions. I went in and I interviewed, and it was just one of those things where I was like, I think this is where I need to be. But what's funny is that I say that God put like holy earmuffs on me, because he did not allow me to know exactly what I was going to do. Like, I'm sure that they interviewed me well, but if I had known that I was going to have to talk about sexual abstinence to a room full of kids, I probably would have like screamed and run out the door. But that's where he had me, and the rest is history from there.
Oh, that's fabulous. That's fabulous.
That's where a little ignorance is bliss.
Yeah.
Yes,
and just a simple follow-up question to that. I mean, when you walked into RealOptions 22 years ago and now you look at where it's at now, how that growth and the different locations and the mobile unit and all that, could you ever imagine God would grow that ministry like that?
No. In fact, I never even wanted multiple locations. I was super happy with, our little place that we had. But when I first walked in, I think we had 5 staff, one location. Our abstinence program that I was taking over had, one school and one church. And, it was one of those things where I got to see it grow under the leadership of my previous director. And then God just took it from that great foundation. And I felt like I've just been holding on to his coattails the last 10 years and trying to, hold on for dear life because he's got a great big picture that I don't always see.
Yeah, I think we've all had that experience where you just, are you sure? What do you have in mind here? And we just, as humans, we're impatient and want to know what's behind the curtain there. But I know you've seen a lot of, or heard a lot of different conversations going on, especially today. We're having conversations from abortion pill reversal to AI. In fact, we've had those subjects discussed on our podcast somewhat recently. If you're speaking to a leader, what's the conversation that you feel is most important to them right now? What do you think that they need to have?
Well, as far as the pro-life movement and standing for life, I think the biggest thing is unity and for us to come together and all the different aspects that people are working in legislatively and strategically and front lines pregnancy centers, that we all come together and that we fight for, for that one cause, even if we do it in different modes. I think that that's super important because the fact is that our enemy is very well organized, very well funded. And that's something that we have lacked a little bit in the past. And I have seen it start to come together with state coalitions, with national organizations. And I just think we're stronger together.
Absolutely. One of the things that again, in conversations that we've had through leaders in the last, since we started the podcast, is they have a different way of going about accomplishing their mission. But like you said, everything needs to be united because we are on the same team. So you mentioned Yellow Pages a little bit ago. And what would you say is the biggest difference as far as leaders and promoting what needs to be promoted today with digital? Do they have to be marketing and digital experts?
Well, a little bit. I mean, we all wear all the hats, and I know way more about digital marketing than I ever thought I would after all of this. And digitally is definitely the way that most of the women and families are finding us. They're on their phones constantly. But what I have said is that, I've been in this movement for so long is that used to, we had to convince a woman to walk through our doors instead of an abortion clinic's doors because, we're in Texas and so abortion is banned currently. Now we have to convince a woman to walk through our doors instead of sit on her couch and wait for her doorbell to ring with her abortion pills. That is a much different environment than we ever have had before. And so it really is a moving target that we are constantly having to pivot. And if you don't pivot, then you're not going to reach that woman. And so that's been a challenge to really just seek the Lord and say, okay, what's next? What do we try next? We've tried all kinds of digital marketing plans. Some have worked really well, some haven't. And then AI has thrown a whole nother interesting wrench into it. I have nowhere near the great knowledge of that yet, but hoping to learn a little bit more because that's definitely the next thing.
Definitely. A lot of our listeners today, Jennifer, are maybe considering a mobile unit and going mobile ministries. I know that you guys just took that on in the last 6 months. I believe your mobile unit was delivered to you. So, is there any advice that you could give to our listeners that are thinking about taking on a mobile unit or just taking one on, or I guess the things that you've learned over the time that you've had that mobile unit?
Yes. Well, we just got our brand new mobile unit 6 months ago, but we've actually been running a mobile unit for about 3.5 years. And it's been a learning experience. One of the things that I didn't want when we got our mobile unit was that I saw so many centers who had mobile units, but that were utilizing them very little. They were only sending them out 1 or 2 days. And I just felt like that wasn't a great use of resources. And so as far as I was concerned, if we were going to do it, let's do it and let's get it out and serving at least 4 days a week. What we actually did was we were asked to start a pregnancy center inside the Dallas Dream Center, but that was going to take about 2 years of restoration of this historic building. And we were actually on top of the building in downtown Dallas, and they were serving out the parking lot currently. And I felt like the Holy Spirit just said, if you had a mobile unit, you could serve now. And so that's what we did. We bought a mobile unit from another pregnancy center. So I think that's the first thing, is that you don't have to go with, all the bells and whistles initially. There's a lot of people that are selling theirs in order to, buy upgrades or whatever. So you can kind of try it out without a huge price tag at first, which is what we did. And then we just started. The other piece of advice is it takes time to garner that respect and that trust in the community, and that consistency is so important. So don't think that you're going to go out there and in the first, week, you're going to have, all your appointments booked and all of that. I think it takes about 6 months to really get roots down into a community and have the trust for them to start coming. But once that happens, it's a beautiful thing. They expect you to be there. You want to have consistency. You want to be there when you say you're going to be there. And it's a great way to kind of trial out if a brick and mortar location is needed in the area. And so for us, once we opened our center inside the Dream Center, we already had that trust built in. So immediately, our very first week, we were completely booked at that location.
Yeah. And real quick, just on that location you have at the Dream Center, that building is kind of a work of art, really. I mean, just when I was starting to insure it and working with Don, I was just really impressed by that location. So, and what you're doing.
Yes, it is a round building. And just so you know, hanging pictures on curved walls is absolutely a nightmare.
That's one of those unexpected challenges.
Yes.
So I just wanted to get back to, you said it took about 6 months to get for the community to be comfortable with you being there. Did you, and then I'm going to get back to the marketing. In hindsight, would you have done anything differently to expedite that comfort, or as far as how you reached out to them, or do you have any tips that you might be able to offer regarding that?
Yes. So we kind of relied on the Dream Center that had already been down there doing, food distribution and clothes distribution and things like that to kind of draw us into that trust factor. So, if they trust them already and they trust us, then we kind of have that by association, which was wonderful. But getting more of those associations inside the community, I think helps tremendously. So if I had to do it over again, I would probably build out those community assets much quicker so that we could get our information in, say, their food pantries, in the toiletry bags they're handing out in the community, those type of things, so that they're already being given something by a trusted source, and then we are trusted by association. So that's probably what I would have done quicker.
Okay, that's great advice. And so switching gears just a little bit, what do you think leaders should understand about the role they play in shaping policy and culture? Again, you've spoken to Texas legislature and you're you are in the know of that. So any advice you can offer?
Yes. And that's just to have a voice. I think for a long time at least in the pregnancy center movement, we were told, don't be political. Don't say anything political. And we are not political organizations. That's true. But they need to hear from our perspective. And so that's when I started testifying, is that I wasn't testifying on behalf of a particular political candidate. I was testifying on behalf of our clients. How can I give them a voice in a way that could impact their community? And most of them are not going to feel comfortable testifying before the legislator, but I can be their voice. We just recently, probably about 6 or 7 months ago, testified before one of the Senate committee chairs, and it was a pro-life bill. And, Texas is a pretty pro-life state. I mean, that's considering all the states, we're one of the top ones, but we were outnumbered probably 10-1 in that hearing of, people coming in. And it was because most of the pro-life workers are working. We're actually at our centers doing stuff. But if we can pull away just for a little bit, or just send in a testimony, I think it's really important for them to hear from the front lines, the people that we serve, really what is going on.
So what is it that after 22 years, what is it that keeps you going? what you do is challenging. What most of our listeners, or what our listeners do, is challenging work. But what gets you out of bed in the morning?
Jesus. So some days I'm just like, I don't think I have anything left. Or, I don't have new ideas, or I don't, all the things. But then I remember that he put me at a seat at this table for a reason, even though sometimes I don't know what that reason is, or I think it's a little bit of a crazy reason. And then also I don't know if I shared this with you, but my personal story links into why I am doing what I'm doing. I was adopted, and back then all adoptions were closed and you didn't know anything about the other side. And I was always very blessed. I felt very blessed to be adopted. I was always told that my birth mother loved me. I knew my adopted parents loved me. But they said, if you ever want to know anything, let us know. We'll help you one day. I was a senior in Bible college and started having very vivid dreams of a young girl being pregnant. And every time I woke up, I felt like the Lord was saying, find her. And so I finally called my dad, who happened to be a private investigator. That helps out. You should always have one of those in the family. Except if you're trying to get away with something as a teenager, that's not helpful. He found my birth mother's name, and he called my mom in, and he told my mom my birth mother's name, and her face went pale and she ran out of the room. And she comes running back in carrying a coffee cup, crying. And he said, what is wrong? And she said, I know her. So my birth mother was 14 when she got pregnant with me, and my mom was teaching her at the time. It was her favorite student.
Oh,
My birth mother had a terrible home life, and she was in my mom's classroom after school most days. And so when she had graduated high school, she had brought my mom this coffee cup, and she'd kept it all these years.
Oh my gosh.
And so my mom called my birth mother and said, do you remember me? And she was like, of course, you were my favorite teacher. And she said, well, we have something else in common. And she told her about me. And my birth mother just said, if I could have picked one person, it would have been you. And the Lord allowed me to find out my story 6 months before I started working at RealOptions. And so I am one of those babies. I was one of those circumstances that was not a good circumstance, but God had a purpose. And if I can use my story in order to help others feel like they have a purpose, that's what I want to do.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Well, I have full body chills.
Yes.
And the stories like yours are why I say I don't believe in coincidence, that everything comes from Jesus, and it was his plan. And thank you for sharing that. That is amazing. Kirk, do you have any more questions?
Yeah. You're the way that things have been going, Jennifer, you're just really moving and shaking with the center, and then all the different things that you're doing through the Texas legislation and nationally. What I know that what's the state conference? Is it the Life Ambassadors? Is that the Texas Life Ambassadors?
Yes.
So
Life Ambassadors of Texas.
Okay. And are you planning on I know a lot of the centers that I work with in different states have state conferences. Is Texas going to have a state conference? With all the, I know that I talked to a lot of people in Heartbeat, and they were excited about getting a state conference in Texas. So is that something in the future?
We would love to do that. We currently are doing a conference for Texas directors, so directors of pregnancy centers. So we did our first one last year, and it was just such an encouragement to bring all of these leaders together for rest and for rejuvenation, but also to problem solve. You've got this. Have I tried this? Here are some of the things. And it was just such a beautiful time. So we're going to do that again this year. We would also like to do something where we could bring all different types of, say all the marketing people together, all of the, all the development people together, so that they can talk to people who are in the same state, dealing with some of the same issues, and have the same camaraderie that the directors have. But we're still fairly new. I think we have been around for about 3 years now. So, little by little, we're kind of chipping away at that. But the national things that I do, I actually am a contract worker for preborn as well. And I have a real passion for the gospel. And so I've been doing evangelism trainings all across the U.S., which brings pregnancy centers from all over that region and just encourages them towards how to share the gospel more boldly. And one of our clinics, we see a huge number of Hindus and Muslims. And so we have developed specific ways of how to share the gospel with them. And so we have been teaching that as well. And I truly believe that we're going to have a revival come out of pregnancy centers, because there are people that are walking through our doors that would never walk through a church.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's just amazing to see all the different things that you're doing. I mean, and thank you for what you're doing to save and protect lives. Anything that you can give us any insight? I know you're growing the locations, the new mobile unit. Anything else that you foresee that you can tell us about what's going to come up with Real Options in the next couple of years?
Well, we actually just yesterday opened our Real Opportunity Center. And so our main flagship center, we had half the building, and that was our clinic, where we did all the medical services. But we had been praying for the other half of that building because we had a vision of how, after they make a choice for life, how do we help them thrive? Because I think for a long time, we've had this kind of pendulum swing from being just resources, right, to full medical. And now I think we're going to hit a sweet spot where we can actually serve and come around them with wraparound services and be excellent medically, in the medical field as well. And so in our new Real Opportunity Center, we're going to be doing parenting classes. We have a baby boutique. We have our fatherhood program. So we're doing daddy boot camps. We've even started taking our fatherhood program into the local jails and prisons. And that has been just a huge opportunity to serve them because most of them have never had fathers. So that's been a great opportunity. We're also starting pro-life apologetics for young people. How can they have these conversations when they're bombarded with social media and so many different things? We're also going to start cooking classes for our Hindus and Muslims. So we're inviting them in to cook their favorite dish. And as they're doing that, we are going to teach them about Jesus. So those are just some of the things that we want to do to really open things up and to really see thriving families, because to me, it's not just about that one person or that one family changing their minds, but how do we dig up the roots of abortion in our communities so that it's no longer chosen? And that's going to be helping with fatherlessness and helping with the parenting that they, the perpetuation of those things that they learned. And how do we stop those things and give them hope and hopefully Jesus as well so that we can break those cycles?
You sort of got into this center under the abstinence program, teaching abstinence and sexual risk avoidance in the schools. And I think you said there was one school and one church that you started off with. I'm sure that that's grown now to multiple schools. Can you maybe tell our listeners about how they can go from one school and one church to maybe to where you've gone in your abstinence program?
Yes. Well, a lot of it has to do with state laws. So, I talked to some of my sweet friends in New York. They're like, I have no idea how you get the things done in Texas. So some of it has to do with the laws. Today, we're in 66 public schools. They spoke to almost 13,000 students last year, almost 700 presentations. And we are just really blessed that the state of Texas identifies that abstinence truly is a sexual risk avoidance and that it should be taught in schools. So we're grateful for that. Usually you have to go through a health committee of the school district. And so you go before that committee. In Texas, it's the SHAC committee, and you have to get approved in that school district. And then you have to form relationships with those principals, with those counselors in the individual schools. But what we found is that once you have done that, they really fight for you. Even if a teacher leaves, we've actually gotten into other school districts because a teacher left one school and went to a different district and wanted our program there. And so I think knowing your laws and in your state and then also what can you provide for them? So we go into the schools and say, hey, we can do this for free for you and your teachers don't have to do it. And that's a real benefit to them. And we've just seen a lot of fruit from the students as well. Do our presentations in small groups, so in classes versus assemblies. And we just see that works much, much better. And we have a much better quality.
Thank you.
I would imagine the students would open up a little bit more in a smaller setting. And we had Tracy Pike on. She does abstinent training, and she said it's important to reach out to the community for partnerships to facilitate some of those relationships that get you in the schools. So thanks for that. Well, one more question for you. And each week we ask our guests to offer one lifeline, which is just a practical step that you can offer. So one thing, if there was just one thing, like an action item that our listeners can take with them this week, what would that be?
And this is something that I'm working on myself. So I'm preaching to myself in this, and that is to have a Sabbath, to have a rest. Being in ministry full time for 22 years, that can be so overwhelming. And I have gotten to those points where I was just so tired, but we're doing good work, right? So we have to continue, but we're no good to our team. We're no good to our community if we are burned out. And I actually went on a sabbatical several years ago, and it really just changed my life. And one of the things that keeps coming up, because that busyness, sets in, right? It doesn't just go away. But the first few weeks of my sabbatical, I was just struggling with a lot of spiritual warfare. And I sat with the Lord one day and I was like, why? Why is this so hard? And what I felt like the Lord showed me was that Satan is much more scared of a rested warrior than a weary one. And so I guess my biggest piece of advice would be rest, warriors. Rest.
Jennifer, this has been truly inspiring. Thank you for giving us a window into the important work happening at Real Options and in all the things you do. Friends, if today's conversation stirred something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Pass it along to someone who needs it. You can connect with Jennifer using the information that we'll have in the show notes. And until next time, keep leading with courage and compassion. Thanks for joining us today on Lifeline for Leaders. If today's episode was meaningful, feel free to share it with someone who might benefit. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a conversation.
Remember, you don't have to walk this mission alone. We're honored to walk alongside you.
See you next time.